Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really zeroing in on this brand new US-UK economic prosperity deal, the EPD.
Right.
And to properly, get our heads around it, we've got the official documents from both the US and UK governments, the outlines of what they're actually proposing.
hmm
We're also going to look back a bit at a 2019 notice. It gives a little context, I think, on how these talks can kind of evolve over time.
Yeah, exactly. And our mission here really is to make sense of what this deal actually means for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We want to pull out the most important bits, what's changing in how the U.S. and U.K. trade, and maybe spot some of the potential impacts down the line.
Okay, let's dive in then. So this deal, it was announced May 8th, 2025, which history buffs might know was the 80th anniversary of Victory Day. Interesting timing.
It is, and the stated goals, the headlines,
Yeah.
are all about increasing trade that benefits both sides, a win-win, making things easier for businesses,
Right, less red tape.
hopefully, and also strengthening that economic side of the special relationship based on, fairness and reciprocity. That's the language they're using.
Fairness and reciprocity. Okay.
But, and this is really key at this point, what we have now is the initial framework. It's the general direction, the intentions.
So not the final signed on the dotted line deal yet?
Not at all. The actual details, the specifics, those are going to be hammered out in negotiations that are basically just kicking off now. Think of it like a blueprint, not the finished house.
Okay.
And importantly, this initial document, it isn't legally binding. It just signals where they want to go.
Got it. So a roadmap. Where are we seeing some actual concrete proposals then? Tariffs seem like a big one.
Oh, absolutely. Tariffs are central. The general idea is that both countries want to lower tariffs on goods that are, important to each other. Preferential treatment.
But not like tomorrow.
No.
Yeah.
No. It's something they'll negotiate over time. They even talk about coordinating when they make these reductions.
Okay. Are there any specific examples already out there?
There are, yeah. Let's take beef. The UK has said it'll get rid of its 20% tariff on U.S. beef.
Wow.
But
Oh.
there's a catch. Initially, that's only within a 1,000 metric ton quota. A small amount, really.
Oh.
But then they're also creating a new duty-free quota for U.S. beef of 13,000 metric tons.
Okay, that's more significant. And the U.S. side?
The U.S. is basically playing ball. They're going to reallocate 13,000 metric tons of their existing global beef quota, the other countries category, specifically for the U.K.
So it's a balanced move, more beef flowing both ways, potentially.
That seems to be the intent, yes. And we see something similar, quite specific, for ethanol, too.
Ethanol.
Okay. The U.K. is offering a preferential duty-free tariff rate quota, quite a mouthful of 1.4 billion liters for U.S. ethanol.
1.4 billion liters, that sounds like a lot.
It is. It could
Yeah.
open up a pretty big market for American ethanol producers.
Right. Now, cars, always a huge deal between the U.S. and U.K. What's happening on the auto front?
Okay, so the U.S. is indicating a plan to create a specific quota for U.K. cars,
Okay.
100,000 vehicles per year.
And the tariff on those?
Those would come in at a 10% tariff rate. And there's mention of a related arrangement for auto parts as well.
Only 10%. What happens if they export more than 100,000?
Well, the White House fact sheet mentions that anything over that 100,000 quota would face a much steeper 25% tariff.
Oof. Okay, so a clear limit there. That's definitely a change manufacturers will be watching closely.
Absolutely. It creates a specific threshold with a big jump in cost after it.
What about steel and aluminum? That's been a contentious area with tariffs recently, hasn't it?
It has. And this is where things get, quite interesting. The UK is basically committing to work towards meeting specific U.S. requirements
Requirements about what?
about the security of their steel and aluminum supply chains.
Yeah.
Things like who owns the production facilities, national security type concerns from the U.S. side.
Okay, and if the UK meets these?
If they meet them, then the U.S. will set up a quota for UK steel and aluminum imports at what are called MFN rates, most favored nation rates.
Which are the standard lower rates.
Generally, yes. The standard tariffs the U.S. applies to most trading partners. And this quota would also cover certain derivative products made from steel and aluminum.
And the White House called this?
They actually described it as creating a new trading union for steel and aluminum.
A trading union. That sounds significant. Much closer than before.
It implies a much tighter alignment in these sectors, yes. A big shift from the previous tariff situation.
Okay. What about pharmaceuticals? Another huge, heavily regulated sector.
Right. The plan here is to negotiate significantly preferential treatment for pharma products and ingredients.
But there's a condition, I assume.
There is. It's tied directly to the findings of a U.S. investigation a Section 232 investigation into the pharma industry.
Section 232, those are the national security tariffs, right?
Exactly. So the outcome of that U.S. investigation matters. And again, it's also contingent on the UK meeting those supply chain security requirements we just discussed for steel.
So the UK has to prove its supply chains are secure.
Essentially, yes. And the UK is also committing, separately, to improve the environment for pharma companies operating in the UK. So potential changes on both sides of the trade flow.
It really sounds like a lot of these tariff changes aren't automatic. They hinge on the UK meeting these security standards and what these US investigations find.
Precisely. And that approach, that conditionality, it extends beyond steel and pharma. The plan is to use a similar structured, negotiated approach for other sectors that might face future Section 232 probes or other tariffs.
Always depending on UK supply chain security and US findings.
Exactly. It's a very conditional, phased approach to adjusting tariffs, not just a blanket reduction.
Makes sense. What about making sure the benefits stick to US and UK companies? Rules of origin.
Yes, they've explicitly said they intend to apply rules of origin designed to maximize the trade between the two countries. Meaning rules to prevent companies from outside the US or UK just routing their goods through one country to get the lower tariffs meant for the other. It defines how much local content a product needs to qualify.
Okay. And is the U.S. open to lowering some of its existing tariffs on UK goods beyond these specific deals?
The document says the U.S. affirms it will consider the UK's requests to lower existing U.S. tariffs during the EPD talks.
Consider. So no guarantees, but the door is open for discussion.
Exactly. It's an acknowledgement that the UK will be asking for reductions, which is a step beyond just maintaining the status quo.
It's interesting, looking back at that 2019 notice you mentioned earlier, that seemed like a very preliminary stage, just modeling the idea of duty-free trade.
Right. That was the International Trade Commission, just looking at potential economic effects. This new deal is much more concrete, actually proposing specific, albeit conditional, changes.
That 2019 document also mentioned delays because of funding issues in the U.S. government, didn't it?
It did. A lapse in appropriations. It's a good reminder that these trade negotiations aren't always smooth sailing. They can get interrupted.
So the fact we have this EPD announcement in 2025 suggests a more focused, successful effort this time around.
It seems that way, yes. More momentum.
Okay, so quick tariff recap. Some specific quota changes coming for things like beef and ethanol. Broader reductions are up for negotiation, heavily linked to security requirements and reciprocity.
That sums it up well. But, tariffs are only part of the story. Sometimes it's the non-tariff barriers that are the real headaches for businesses.
Right. Regulations, standards, paperwork. What's the plan there? Agriculture often comes up in that context.
It does. The plan is for constructive work to enhance market access for farm goods and support future talks to strengthen that trade.
Constructive work. Sounds diplomatic.
It does. But importantly, they both reaffirm that any imported food must meet the importing country's safety standards, the SPS rules, plus any other standards they agree on.
So no race to the bottom on food safety.
That's the stated commitment. They also plan to improve market access, talk through specific concerns, cooperate more in verifying exports, and work together in international standard-setting bodies, trying to smooth the process without compromising safety.
Okay. What about things like product testing, making sure a UK product meets US standards, or vice versa?
They're tackling that with conformity assessment bodies. The idea is that each country will treat the other's testing and certification bodies just as favorably as its own.
So if a UK body certifies a product, the US should accept it more easily.
That's the goal. It should save businesses time and money, avoiding duplicate testing.
And they're building on existing agreements, too. Mutual recognition agreements, MRAs.
Yes, they want to expand on the MRAs already in place, negotiating new ones for industrial goods. And they're also aiming for an agreement on how services are regulated domestically.
That could be good for service industries, right? Less red tape across borders?
Potentially, yes. Think finance, consulting, legal services. Reducing regulatory duplication could make a real difference.
Seems like a theme, aligning standards, reducing regulatory friction where possible. What about the digital world, digital trade?
Oh, absolutely. That's a major focus. They're committing to negotiate an ambitious set of rules for digital trade.
Including things like finance online.
Yes, they specifically mentioned services like financial services. They also want provisions for paperless trade, getting rid of physical documents, pre-arrival processing for goods, and generally digitizing customs procedures, all aimed at speeding things up.
Makes sense. Now, moving beyond just the flow of goods and services, the deal mentions cooperation on economic security. What does that cover?
It's quite broad. They plan to cooperate more on economic security generally. That includes coordinating to address what they call non-market policies of other countries.
Meaning state interference that distorts competition.
That's the idea, yes. They also plan closer cooperation on investment security screening, foreign investments, export controls for sensitive tech, and ICT vendor security, building on alignment they already have.
What about government buying things? Procurement.
They're reaffirming commitments under the Global Agreement on Government Procurement, GPA, and their existing FTAs. But they also plan to discuss how these are being implemented.
And that includes the UK's new setup.
Yes, specifically mentioning the UK's new National Security Unit for Procurement and the powers it has under their recent Procurement Act to block bids on national security grounds.
Okay. And cracking down on dodging duties.
Exactly. They're agreeing to negotiate provisions for customs cooperation, specifically to fight duty evasion schemes and illegal transshipment.
Like goods from a third country pretending to be from the UK or US to avoid tariffs?
Precisely that, making sure trade is fair and rules aren't being circumvented.
There's also a mention of looking for actual commercial deals, not just rules.
Yes, a commitment to actively identify opportunities and transactions, especially in critical industries and defense preparedness, that can increase economic integration using government policy and encouraging private sector buy-in.
And the deal touches on broader issues too, like IP, labor.
It does. They intend to discuss high standards for intellectual property rights, labor practices, including specifically mentioning forced labor in supply chains, which is a big focus globally now, and environmental policies.
And the UK will consider its territories.
Yes. The UK states it will consider the interests of territories like Gibraltar or the Falklands, for whose international relations it's responsible.
But the underlying principle, it keeps coming back to that idea of fairness and mutual benefit, doesn't it?
It really does. The text reiterates, the aim is deepening the relationship based on trust and fair reciprocal trade. They've even built in a process for consultation if things feel like they're getting out of balance.
And either side can pull out.
Yes, either country can terminate the arrangement with written notice, though the exact procedures for review and termination are still to be negotiated in the main EPD talks.
Okay, so let's bring it to the present. As of May 8th, 2025, what's the immediate, concrete impact? That 10% reciprocal tariff announced back in April is still on, right?
Yes, that remains in effect. What's new now is the U.S. agreeing to that alternative for Section 232 tariffs on UK autos, the 100,000 vehicle quota at 10%. That's a change.
And the steel and aluminum.
The U.S. is recognizing the U.K.'s economic security measures there and signaling the intent to negotiate that alternative arrangement, the trading union, instead of the Section 232 tariffs. So the mechanism is shifting, even if the final details aren't set.
And the agricultural potential. The White House and Commerce seem quite bullish on that.
They are indeed. The White House threw out a figure of $5 billion opportunity for new U.S. agricultural exports to the U.K.
$5 billion. That's a headline number.
It is. The Commerce Department elaborated, saying the deal removes long-standing UK market barriers, creating this opportunity for things like U.S. ethanol, beef, fruits, vegetables, and so on. That's presented as a significant potential upside compared to before.
So definitely a lot of potential mapped out, but it really sounds like the hard work of negotiation on this economic prosperity deal is just beginning.
Absolutely. This initial framework, it's a crucial first step. It sets the direction and the key topics. But turning this blueprint into a fully operational, detailed trade agreement, that's the next phase, and it'll likely take some time.
Okay, so to wrap up, this new US-UK economic prosperity deal, it definitely marks a significant move. Reshaping trade, focusing on that mutual benefit idea. We see some initial tariff tweaks, planned beef, ethanol, cars, and this big framework to tackle non-tariff barriers and boost cooperation on digital trade, economic security, a lot of areas.
Right. And as you think about this initial focus, particularly on agriculture, autos, steel, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? What other sectors do you think will feel the biggest impacts as the full details of this EPD get negotiated and eventually implemented? It's definitely something to consider, the ripple effects across both economies and just how intertwined they really are.